第三の火を得たことによって輝かしき未来の繁栄を約束された。しかしそのためにもう一つの扉をノックしたことを忘れてはならない。
Hello everyone, I am Zazubar, and welcome to another monster movie review that comes at the request of one of my viewers. I'm sorry I didn't have your name pulled up when I sat down to record this, but I promise when I post this video that in the description of this video, I will be thanking you for recommending me to review this. Now that person, you know who you are, you're going to be asking yourself a question. Why the hell did this take so long? Why am I waiting to review this particular thing until right now? One reason and one reason only. Gorzard posted the goddamn thing on YouTube. I'm making this person sound like they were just like begging me to do this. No, it was one simple, very polite, very great message they posted me. I just found it very hilarious because I really wanted to review this thing, but I couldn't see it. The person being awesome provided me with a link to where I could see it, but for some reason I couldn't get the damn thing to work, and just sorry, that was my sonic screwdriver going off. That's not something you hear every day. But the link wouldn't work for me, so I couldn't watch the damn thing, so I was like, oh crap, I really want to review this. Lucky enough, I guess about a month later, maybe more, Gorzard, good old reliable, posts nothing but copyrighted material. Well, that's not so true anymore. He used to be way worse. He used to just post nothing but copyrighted material. Now he posts reviews and stuff, and the man is surpassing me in every way, shape, and form. I mean, I watched his Godzilla 98 review today, and guys, if you're looking for more hate but a really objective, great analysis of that movie, go check out that guy's review, man, because he kicked that movie's ass. And he also kicked my several reviews of that movie's ass. I was watching it, I'm just like, wow, this is really good. And I was just like, but enough praising Gorzard beyond, thank you for posting what we're going to be reviewing today. I really appreciate, you looking out for us kaiju fans who can't find all this stuff, and giving us access to it. Because there would have been no other way for me to see this TV series, aside from this. So, the person who requested this review and myself, we're going to be thanking Gorzard. Anyway, so what the hell am I talking about? If you follow Gorzard's channel, you probably know what I'm talking about, and if you read the title and understood the little joke I made at the beginning of this video, you probably know what we're going to be reviewing today. But I'll state it obviously for both my sake and for composure's sake. Today, ladies and gentlemen of the kaiju community and others who walked in, we are going to be reviewing the very short-lived TV series Agon the Atomic Dragon. Why the hell am I talking about this? A couple of reasons. One, it's a 60s Japanese giant monster thing. I don't want to say movie because it's not a movie. So it had some interest for me there. I was like, oh, a giant Japanese monster that wasn't Godzilla. I should watch this and review it for you guys and for my own search for amusement. So what the hell is this thing? Well, again, it's a 60s Japanese giant monster TV show. But beyond that, it's got another reason that I'm yearning to talk about it. It is a major, major Godzilla ripoff. And there have been reports and things and, controversies around this movie that have said that it's not a Godzilla ripoff, but watch it, guys. It is a Godzilla ripoff. Agon has very, very little to nothing to distinguish himself from Godzilla. The characters are very similar. The plot is identical beyond some of the complexities of the original Godzilla being taken out. Like, really, the plot of a giant monster attacking Japan that has H-bomb origins and the Japanese government reacting to that, that's what Agon takes from Godzilla. And it doesn't have much more to offer beyond that, except for a weirdly random thrown in like a crook plot, like a robber, which came in Godzilla movies later. And actually, even before that, I mean, we had the financial tycoons in Mothra versus Godzilla, so I was kind of reminded of them. But beyond that, here's where the controversy comes in. We'll get into this before we get into the TV show, because I think it's interesting. The really interesting thing that could potentially question whether or not this is a Godzilla ripoff, because I was pretty confident when I was considering doing this review that it was, without me saying, oh, there's other stuff that factored in. No, it's just like it's a Godzilla ripoff. Not accurate. There are two major things that kind of lead me to not be able to call this just a Godzilla ripoff and be done with it. Two major things. One, Shinichi Sekizawa, who was a very important, influential Godzilla writer back in the night, basically throughout Godzilla's entire Showa history. He didn't write every movie, but basically the bulk of Showa Godzilla was written by Shinichi Sekizawa. I can never say his name right, goddammit. So Shinichi Sekizawa, oh god, I can't say his name. Shinichi Sekizawa, I think that's how you say it, actually wrote kinda Agon the Atomic Dragon, or at least he was heavily behind plotting the premise for the company who wanted to make the TV show. And by that token, he didn't write the original Gojira. That was Shigeru Kayama, Ishiro Honda, and one other guy whose name I never remember. But you know, he had so much to do with Showa Godzilla. He was very influential on Toho's writing staff. He wrote so many 60s monster movies. You know, it's hard to pin him down as ripping off a movie or a character he had such a connection to. But that being said, the man did not write the original Godzilla. And if anything, Agon is the most direct ripoff of that. The structure is just too similar to ignore. But that particular controversy, and there's another one behind it as well. The guy who did the suit effect for Agon was an underling of E.G. Subraya, and I think worked on Ultraman for a while, I think. I'm not really sure, but I think he worked on Ultraman with E.G. Subraya and Subraya Studios when they did that show. Aside from his work at Toho and obviously his connection to Godzilla. That out of the way, though, I don't want to not call it a Godzilla ripoff, because Shinichi Sekizawa did not write the original Godzilla and did not come up with that formula and that structure, and he did not create the character of Godzilla. If, say, Tomoyuki Tanaka had written Agon the Atomic Dragon, this would be a very different review in terms of my feelings on whether or not this is a Godzilla ripoff. Because then you just be... The criticism would not be ripping off as much as it is come up with a more original idea, dude. But Shinichi Sekizawa, again, he didn't fully fledge out the scripts and all that. He was just behind the premise. And Toho specifically stated back then that that was the reason why they weren't going to pursue legal action against the studio that was producing Agon, because he was connected to it, and since he had such an intimate relationship with Godzilla, they were like, not so much ripoff as borrowing things and applying it elsewhere. Happened with Gamera 2 years later. Here is the stark difference between between Gamera and Agon. Gamera, while it is definitely a Godzilla ripoff, I would be more comfortable with calling Gamera Godzilla inspired as opposed to Agon. Because Gamera shares, he shares a lot with Godzilla, but beyond being a monster awakened by nuclear radiation, the whole Cold War backdrop, attacking Japan, the color palette, there's not much else to connect Gamera with Godzilla. aside from some of the production team from Toho going over to Dai to help make Gamera happen. But, excuse me, at the same time, Gamera became his own thing later, and that's definitely a part of it, but still, there's something in Gamera that doesn't let me call him just a Godzilla ripoff, because I'm also a Gamera fan, so, mainly of the Heisei series, mind you, which is not a Godzilla ripoff at all, but, you know, even still, I do like Gamera enough where I wouldn't go as far to call him just another ripoff. Agon, on the other hand, again, there's practically nothing to distinguish him from Godzilla. He's got the same exact origin, basically the same powers. He doesn't breathe atomic breath like Godzilla does, but he breathes fire, which is, I mean, come on, guys, it's close enough. That's another thing Gamera borrowed from Godzilla, but again, I'm willing to accept that because Gamera both became his own thing and had stuff. There's stuff about the first Gamera that does work on its own merits. Agon, there's really not much that isn't in Godzilla to say I like Agon for Agon. No. Again, he breathes fire. He has atomic origins. His character design, again, very little to distinguish it from Godzilla besides worse suit effects. And they're not drastically worse. That was the one thing I was surprised about. The suit effects in Agon are not atrocious. There are moments where they look pretty bad, but it's very clear that this guy had some connections to Sabraya, because some of Sabraya does see through. There's some decent double projection shots, some decent overlays, some pretty good miniature work. The suit does not look as bad as something like Yongari, but I almost think maybe that's because Yongari was in color and Agon was not. Like, I almost wonder if Agon would have looked worse if it was in color, and probably, but again, based on what we see on screen, Agon does not have the worst suit effects I've ever seen. It's the design of the monster that bugs me, because I'm a Godzilla fan and someone who knows that kind of, you know, who knows these kinds of characters, where I know what distinguishes one from another, what makes one good. And Agon, you know, just based on the fact that it is so similar to Godzilla, is not a great monster design. There's some interesting stuff going on with the head, but not much beyond that. It's basically Godzilla. He's got spines, it's Godzilla. I mean, really, the point of this show being made was just because Godzilla was popular in 1964. So it doesn't surprise me that a TV show inspired and partially ripping off him would come out of that. I almost wonder if maybe Shikichi Sekizawa was trying to get a Godzilla TV show off the ground, which couldn't happen. For reasons unbeknownst to me, and he just decided to do another character like Godzilla, so some kind of giant monster TV show could capitalize on the popularity of them in the mid-60s. That's not confirmed, it's just me speculating based on what I know of the history and all that, but still, there's just not much to distinguish it, and that bugs me because, and I don't want to talk too much about Sekizawa's connection, because that's not something that was clear to me when I watched it. When I watched it, the only thought I kept having was, God, this is so similar to Godzilla. And I know some of you might be watching this review and going, dude, stop comparing it to Godzilla, just review it on its own terms. And God, am I trying, but guys, if you haven't seen this, and I'll say this, if you like giant monster movies, it's pretty entertaining, but watch it, and I dare you to try and not think of Godzilla when you watch it. It is impossible. If I made a bet on that, I would be a millionaire, because Godzilla just seeps through this TV show. Beyond Agon's design, man, one of the scientists in the show, I don't know their names, but one of the scientists in the show was very Yamane-ish. There's really not a Serizawa, which doesn't surprise me because the show is basically the original Godzilla cutting out all the complexities. It's the bare bones premise with a TV show built around that. But they don't really have a Serizawa. They do definitely have a Yamane. Though they turn their archetype for of a Yamane-ish character into just a nuclear physicist as opposed to a paleontologist. Though he seems to know enough about paleontology to disclose what the hell Agon is. They don't give a specific dinosaur species, but it's clearly he's got some background in dinosaur studies. And he basically gives the same exact explanation for Agon as Yamane did for Godzilla in the original film. As Godzilla fans know, that explanation got contradicted in later continuities, but just based on that film, Agon has the same origin. Dinosaur hibernating under the ocean's depths, the H-bomb woke it up and mutated it. That's it. Nothing else beyond that. It's just Godzilla. I mean, it's strikingly similar. Not just strikingly, it's blatantly similar. It shocked me that this thing got made, and I'm not surprised that it almost didn't, because Toho was like, what the hell, man? I'm just shocked that they let it slide, because it is just so similar. I was just like shocked. And I'm saying this like it makes this the worst thing ever. No, not really. What I'm mainly trying to express by going into all this huge like rant about how similar this is to Godzilla is mainly just because that's the only thought I could develop while I was watching it. And there's just so many of them. I'm going to try and name off the ones that I can, but it would almost be superfluous because I've already done an hour and a half review of Godzilla, so it's just so goddamn similar. Beyond Agon himself, the plot's very similar. Aside from some little tweaks here and there to play around with the whole nuclear setting, the way in which Agon rises, I suppose, is very different from the way Godzilla did in his film. In the original Gojira, of course, Godzilla just shows up. As they've said in other films, the Japanese government was completely caught off guard. He just shows up, and then his origin is explained later. Excuse me. Agon wears his origin on his sleeve, and there is a series of events that leads up to the arrival of Agon. To exemplify, I'll describe it. What happens is there's like this truck filled with nuclear waste that crashes in a rainstorm into the sea, and apparently that's the thing that attracts Agon to Japan. I'm liking it so far. It's an interesting way, and they don't directly say this, but this is what I inferred from it, that that's kind of the reason why he picks Japan, because, you know, he could have just gone, and of course there are other reasons that are developed in documentaries about the original Godzilla for why a monster like that would choose Japan, but, you know, it's a nice quick thing to say, oh, this is why he's coming here now, because he's attracted to the nuclear radiation. And it is expelled in this show that Agon needs to live on nuclear power to survive. That's something that Gamera would use later, and something that Godzilla would use later. And I'm not saying they're ripping it off. I think that's just a natural inference from a monster that lives on, that is born from nuclear power, that it would make sense that he'd have to feed on it. And it's even implied in the original Gojira that that's a factor, but it's not explicitly said like it is here. It's a plot point here, that Agon attacks a nuclear power plant to get power and create sustenance for himself. They explain that intricately, which I thought was cool. Again, there were a couple of nice touches that they're not terribly original, but they're nice in expounding upon plot. And if Agon is anything, it's definitely not boring. There's definitely enough dialogue-wise and you know, plot-wise to keep you engaged for all 4 episodes. I do not recommend you watch all 4 episodes in one go, however. And I'll get into this more a little later, but beyond that, there's not much I want to say more about like the plot detail-wise, because we've been making this review longer than it needs to be. Beyond Agon coming to Japan and attacking, it's basically just the Japanese reaction to that. We don't really get a great public panic scene like we get a plethora of in the original Godzilla, you know, Gamera, all these different giant monster movies of the time. In fact, most of the movie takes place on a beach. And I suppose the reason for this was because that's where they could film comfortably. Like, I don't think they were comfortable with going into a major city and shooting there like the original Godzilla would. Or did. Agon stays in very desolate, rural, beachy areas and is safe there. I think the most populated area they go to is a small fishing village, and there's stock footage of Tokyo, and then there's also miniature sets where Agon attacks later. But even when you see people running away from Agon later on in the show when he attacks a major city, which is weird, we'll talk about that in a sec, they're all shot in front of, like, on hills and shit. So it's not like we're watching people running through the streets getting trampled like we did in, again, Gojira and Gamera and all these different movies. It's very rural, and it's interesting, if nothing else, it kind of leads to the show feeling like it has a much smaller scale than I think it meant to. Like, when you do a giant monster show or a movie or whatever, you want to create a large scale for the monster to have that big imposing threat upon a big imposing area. That's just what you do. And Agon doesn't really do that. It stays very, very small. Again, as a TV show, I suppose there is excuses for it, but I think it's something that could have been very easily fixed. I mean, the show is clearly not afraid to not show things in favor of expounding them in dialogue, and creating a large scale with dialogue can be very effective. And Agon at no point tries to do that. It's very, very, well, it does for certain things, but it doesn't do that to create the larger scale. It does it to expand upon plot, which is fine. That if you have a low budget, that's the best way to go rather than showing something shitty. Again, I've been getting into Doctor Who lately, and that's what they do all the time. But Agon only does that for plot reasons and not for creating a larger scale reasons. To compare it to Doctor Who feels huge in terms of its universe and its expansion. Agon feels very tied and fixed in dialogue. Or actually, better way to do it, do it in radio reports. There's very little use of the radio in this TV show, and giant monster movies and stuff made very great use of the radio as a device to explain what the monsters are doing when you don't want to show it. An example that's jumping to mind is something that came out this year, and that would be Ghidra. Ghidra used the radio constantly to explain what the monsters were doing when Honda and Sekizawa didn't want to show it. They would just say, okay, the monsters are moving in this area now, and then you get a brief clip of them doing something, but it wouldn't be like we're watching Godzilla walk through Nagoya. No, they're telling us that it's happening because there's more important plot stuff to get to later, so we can just move on. The radio is a great device for this time period, and Agon doesn't use it at all. I think there's like 2 or 3 points where the radio even becomes a part of it, but I think that was a wasted chance. Again, the show does not use its medium to its advantage. It feels very much so like a movie broken up into 4 parts. It feels very serialized. And I think that was not a good use of budget. If you've got a low budget, you can't do anything beyond a TV show, use that to your advantage and do something interesting with it. And Agon tries to be a big screen giant monster movie on a small screen, and it doesn't really work that well. Beyond the whole, beyond the whole adapting it for the small screen in the same kind of style as something like, the Godzilla films of the time, what also bogs Agon down is its weird-ass characters. I already mentioned the scientist, but he's not really an issue. He's kind of cool, actually. Everyone else is fucking weird as hell. And not like they're unlikable or insulting or anything. No, if anything else, they're just archetypical monster movie characters, which, as a monster movie fan, I like those archetypes, so I kind of dug it. But they're weird-ass characters. The dialogue in this show ranges from flat to fucking bizarre. Again, there are some decent exchanges that expound upon plot, like there's this interesting discussion about there's this interesting kind of just blatant spelling out of morals. Basically, there's a discussion about what the show is trying to get across about atomic bombs. And if you follow my channel and you follow these kind of movies, I'm sure you know what that is. It basically summarizes in about 5 minutes what the original Gojira spends an hour and a half exploring. So that was a little bit like, what? And again, that's just not how you tell a story, no matter what medium you're telling it in. And you're trying to express a moral. It's a very heavy-handed moral in Agon the Atomic Dragon. Very clearly they knew that they had to mention it, because if you were doing a monster movie in that time that used atomic origins for your monster, you had to say nukes are bad at some point in the movie or the show or whatever. And Agon is one of those culprits that doesn't use it to, you know, tell a really engaging story that has that theme under the surface. No, it just blatantly says it. And the show is filled with weird, and that dialogue exchange isn't so much weird as it is, that's how, you know, telling the story should let us infer that, not blatantly telling us. But there are examples of just weird-ass dialogue. Like, there's this weird scene where our main reporter character, is in a car with a detective character, and there's this dog that runs across the road, and they stop short, and he gets out of the car, and he goes up to the dog and is like, what are you know, yelling at the dog, which, you know, obviously doesn't understand what he's saying. And then the dog's owner, which is his love interest later on, shows up and calls the dog's name, and it shares his name. And there's this weird-ass exchange about, like, whether or not she's a dog teacher. It's fucking weird. And it's like, we've got a giant monster on the loose, people. Let's focus a little bit. So it's filled with stuff like that, and just weird dialogue exchanges that are just like, what the hell were these people thinking? But beyond weird dialogue, I'm trying to think what else I want to talk about with this show. There's an interesting use of atmosphere in the show and tension. At least there is in the first episode. I think the first episode is definitely the best episode. And the other three are just kind of meh, and, you know, either ripping off Godzilla or just not making any sense. The first episode is definitely the best, and I think the example of that, and again, as a monster show, and again, I think the best example of that is the opening where, or not the opening, one of the middle scenes where our main characters are standing outside of a cave, and one of them runs in because there's this legend about this monster called Agon. Doesn't that idea sound familiar? And he goes in to check it out, and he comes out screaming. And we're supposed to believe that Agon is in there and is coming out. Totally bought it when I first saw it. Totally bought it. Just because it was halfway through the episode, we hadn't seen the monster yet, so I was like, this must be it. And I was waiting for it. And you see this light that's creeping down the cave, and the main characters are standing outside the cave with guns pointed at the cave. Light gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then a little boy pops out with a flashlight. The show got me, and it got me good. That was definitely the best use of tension and atmosphere in the show. There should have been more of that. After that, it's all just flat, kinda. Monster attacks, people react, monster retreats, people react again, and then people talk more. I feel like there should have been more of those kind of using atmosphere to its advantage rather than using its lack of budget to its deficit. And it's just a flashlight coming down a cave, and it's a great scene. And then the monster shows up 2 seconds later, and it's not very extravagant. He just pops out of the water. I feel like there could have been a much more effective use of atmosphere in the show. That's really what disappointed me, because that's kind of one of the things I was looking forward to with it was, I have a feeling this show is going to make good use of atmosphere because it's low budget, and it's a monster movie or monster movie inspired. So hopefully it'll make a good use of atmosphere. Doesn't. Not at all. It's very, very kind of static, and at no point evokes any emotions just by the way it's shot or the music or anything. If anything, the music itself inspires a weird-ass atmosphere, and it's not intentional. it's just got a fucking weird soundtrack, and a soundtrack, for a lack of better definition, not that it's bad, it's not really a soundtrack. It's a bunch of weird electrical and like strange noises that don't sound like music. It sounds like someone playing on like a futuristic like keyboard, and it doesn't really fit the tone. It's just very, very weird and out there. Again, it creates this weird kind of kooky atmosphere, but I don't think that's intentional. I think it's very much so just like that's an accident of the fact that this was probably a composer who was somebody's cousin, if that makes any sense. And I could be wrong on that, but that's just kind of the way it sounds. Not a very good score. The monster's roar is weird. It's another after product of using weird sound effects. Kind of like the music score, it uses these weird electrical sounds as opposed to using animal roars or instruments. Like, again, as I've said in the past, the original Godzilla used I think it was a mesh glove and a bass instrument. I forget the instrument Akira Ifukube used, but it was something. And then they played it backwards and forwards and played around with it until they got the roar that became very famous. You know, I don't know what Gamera's is, but you know, you look at King Kong, it's a lion roar backward and a tiger roar forward. And that's how you got that King Kong roar. What the fuck is this shit? It's just like, it's almost like, you know what it sounds like? It sounds like someone shoved a dinosaur underwater and then recorded the sound. And it's used when Agon's not underwater. It's used when Agon's on the land, and it sounds bizarre. It's almost got this like haunting, echoey sound to it, but I don't think it was intentional. It sounds very much so just like it's poor sound mixing, and it doesn't really fit the monster's build. It's just not right. But again, it has kind of this weird quality to it that I kind of dug. It was like this weird like a haunting, echoey sound, but again, it didn't really fit. I just kind of dug it as its own weird after product. I don't really have much else to say. We're getting very long on in this review, and that's only because I spent about 10 minutes ranting about the history of this movie, maybe 15 even. So what do you say we wrap this up? Everyone else has places to be, and I've got places to be, so what do you say we wrap this review up? Okay, so Agon the Atomic Dragon, do I recommend it? Yes. Kind of, with a very, very large warning attached to it. Agon is good fun if you like 50s monster movies. I'm not going to say 60s because this didn't feel like a 60s monster movie to me. It felt like a 50s one. It's a clear distinction. It felt very, very 50s American sci-fi to me, and I kind of liked that. And as someone who likes that era in monster movies, I got into it, and I enjoyed it, and it was very, very classic in terms of that. But nothing else beyond that. It's that archetypical formula to the T. So if you're not into that, you're not going to like this show. The special effects are nothing special. It's a very, very low-key attempt at reproducing something like Sobriety did, which makes sense. It's one of his underlings, so they tried their best. Again, they're not the worst effects I've ever seen. Far from it. But there's not much else in there to keep you engaged. The last episode is disappointing because it's the one episode where Agon is supposed to attack a city and doesn't really pan out. You know, weird dialogue, very simple, safe story. You know, there's some stuff here for monster movie fans to enjoy, but not for anyone else. If you're into that crowd, I say give it a watch. But beyond that, I say skip it. But again, if you're into that crowd, I'd say give it a watch. It's fun, but not much beyond that. So I hope you enjoyed this review and found it interesting as a kind of interesting piece of monster movie history. So that's Agon the Atomic Dragon. I'm going to be trying to post more videos kind of, what's the word? Kind of regularly than I have been. What I'm going to try to do is post every Tuesday and every Sunday. I'm going to try and post new movie reviews and just different videos and such. That's kind of the plan. The one series we are trying to advertise now and finish is me, Ian, and Deadpoolzilla are going to be going through all of the new Doctor Who series. So that's going to be happening regularly until we get to Series 7, and then we're going to wait till that's done, and then we'll probably talk about that. But right now, basically every week, we're going to try and post a series review of Doctor Who. So in the coming week, you could probably expect a review of Season 2. Aside from that, probably some sporadic stuff from me for a while because I'm working on the movie. And then after the movie's done, I will be posting content like a motherfucker. You can expect me some more podcast stuff on Geeky Gentleman. I'll be on there regularly all through production of the movie because I don't have to do much for that show. I just have to show up. So that won't be a problem unless I'm shooting nights Ian wants to record, which might be a problem, but I don't think it's going to happen that often. But when it does, we'll know about it in advance. So you can see me on Geeky Gentleman. You can see me on this channel posting sporadically for about 2 months while I'm in production of the movie. But I'll still be posting, I'll try and post a review, again, every Tuesday and Saturday, or Sunday. And keep your eyes out. I might be doing a live show one of these coming Saturdays to test out a potential pilot for a live show I want to do over the summer, but we'll see. So keep your eyes open. I might be doing a pilot for that show, but we'll see how it goes. I won't say anything else about it until we work out the kinks. So keep your eyes out for that, though. So that's all from me, Zazubar. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys all soon.